Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NSC's fourth webinar in our Summit Sequel series. My name is Janine LaPrade, and I serve as the Managing Director for the Policy and Research team here at the National Skills Coalition. I think we're going to welcome you all into this space and probably give a few minutes for all of you to land here in this virtual Zoom room with us. We've got an exciting panel lined up for this afternoon, and I am going to just say a few words about this session in relation to the overall Summit sequel before we dive into the conversation. So as many of you know, because hopefully you've attended maybe an earlier session, NSC Summit Sequels are part of a series of virtual events that are helping us continue the conversation that we started at our annual Skills Summit, which was focused on federal and state skills policies that can contribute to an inclusive economic recovery. And this is the fourth sequel in our six-part series. So this one, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into what it looks like to advance equity and job quality in the context of industry partnerships. And my colleague, Nikisha and Roderick are joining me in this session. We are excited then to have Nikisha moderating the upcoming Summit sequel, which will be focusing more on developing an inclusive and equitable workforce system, and that webinar will be happening on July 21st. And you can register for that Summit sequel with a link that my colleague Roderick will be dropping into the chat, and you will also be able to get find your way to see the series of Summit sequels, including getting access to recordings for ones that you might not have been able to participate in previously. The other thing I wanted to note is that we are excited to be reconvening in person next May for our annual Skills Summit. So the dates for that are May 1st through 3rd, and we invite you to save the date on your calendar and hopefully be able to join us in Washington, D.C. next year for what is always, from my vantage point, a great opportunity to reconnect with folks in the field who are part of the coalition and doing really important work that we want to continue to try to elevate at the federal level, and also to be able to highlight and spotlight at the state level with some of the work we're doing. From a housekeeping perspective, I just wanted to note that we encourage you all to weigh in on the chat, introduce yourselves as you're logging in here. Feel free to offer ideas up from related to work you're doing. Feel free to ask questions. We invite you to do the question part of this through the Q&A feature that's in the webinar setup, and we'll be moderating the chat to make sure that if you end up throwing questions into the chat, we'll make sure they get in the Q&A queue. So with that, I wanted to just say that we're, again, excited to have this set of panelists with us today. We are joined by Michelle Chang from the Economic Development Administration and 4 NSC partners and leaders in the field to discuss the importance of and their experience with advancing equity and job quality through industry partnerships. So as many of you know, in communities all around the country, industry partnerships have been forming for really over the last decade and are helping drive industry-specific training and hiring strategies that meet the needs of local businesses and workers. We know that developing industry partnerships takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of relationships, it takes a lot of funding, it takes a lot of support from policymakers to ensure that the infrastructure needed to have these partnerships form and be successful is in place. And we're also learning a lot about what it looks like for these partnerships to be focusing more on equity and making sure that people are getting access to education and training and are on career pathways that really are centering quality jobs and upward economic mobility. And so today we're going to be diving into what some of the recipes for success might look like for these partnerships in a few different states, as well as in some specific regions, And we're also going to get a better understanding of, in addition to really engaging with the business community, what it looks like for these partnerships to try to center workers in the work itself and to really be in a place to lift up worker voice and ensure that workers are in the design of these partnerships, as well as weighing in on how effective these partnerships are for their success in the labor market. With that set up, I am going to turn the conversation over to Michelle Chang. Michelle is joining us as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy with the Department of Commerce's Economic Development Administration. I had the pleasure of meeting Michelle. I don't know how many years ago it was, Michelle, but we did a little bit of work together tied to a network of industry partnerships that were forming in the healthcare space. And it was a real opportunity and pleasure to get to know you a bit in that work. And I'm excited that you are in the leadership role that you're in with the Economic Development Administration. And we really appreciate you being with us today to take the time to share more about what's happening from EDA's perspective in terms of the investments you're making in these industry partnerships, as well as just the array of initiatives you've got in play, including what you're doing with your colleagues in other agencies and in the White House, and to really support and advance this work in states and regions all over the country. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to you and invite you to share a little bit more with us about what's happening there from your vantage point.
Great, thanks so much, Janine. Can you all hear me okay? As you all can probably appreciate, with experiencing some internet issues today, so just holler if y'all can't hear me. First of all, thank you, Janine, for the kind introduction. Yes, Janine and I met several years ago, and I'd like to always think back to it's folks like Janine who really taught me everything I know right now about workforce. So big thank you to folks like her who have been so gracious and taking me under their wing and really just sharing so many great experiences. First of all, I want to thank you and the National Skills Coalition for inviting me to participate today. We at the Economic Development Administration at Commerce, we share your commitment to inclusive, high-quality skills training that really allow individuals to broaden their career opportunities and for businesses to expand. We know particularly now that is more important than ever. And we know that you all, for more than 20 years, have played a key role in helping to shape state and federal skills policies designed to help advance economic development. So I'm here today to discuss, like Janine said, how EDA, as we refer to the Economic Development Administration as, works further to help that cause throughout our nation. So for those of you who are not familiar with EDA, we are the only federal government agency focused exclusively on economic development. While we don't invest directly in businesses, we do work closely with local economic development officials to support competitive, bottom-up, regionally focused development strategies that are focused on helping stimulate both private investment, but also creating new jobs. We have a number of flexible programs that really help communities revitalize, expand, upgrade their physical infrastructure, including establishing technology and business incubators and accelerators to attract new industry jobs and clusters. We also provide technical assistance to manufacturers affected by import competition, and we help businesses obtain critical gap financing that they might not otherwise have available to them. And through the Biden-Harris administration, we have redefined our investment priorities. We at EDA, our primary programming is grant programs. And so when we think about the investments that we make through our grants, one of our key priorities is equity. Our investment priorities provide a framework for how we think about the grants that we give out and the communities and people we serve. And while EDA has always supported the nation's communities, and we have really recommitted ourselves to ensuring that traditionally underserved populations and communities, including women, communities of color, tribal nations, rural areas, and others, receive the support that they need to build a better America. While EDA's program budget has historically been around $300 million, recent funding provided by Congress through disaster supplementals, including the CARES Act and most recently the American Rescue Plan Act, have resulted in EDA's budget expanding exponentially. We're going to first talk about the American Rescue Plan Act. We were allocated at EDA $3 billion through the American Rescue Plan Act to assist communities nationwide in their efforts to build a better America by accelerating the recovery from the pandemic and helping build local economies that will be more resilient to future economic shocks. EDA's American Rescue Plan funding empowers us to be able to build on our greatest strength, which is, like I mentioned, flexible funding opportunities to support community-led economic development. We fundamentally believe that local communities and regions know better than anybody else what type of support, type of projects they really need to be able to help spur local economic development in their region. So under the American Rescue Plan Act, we are making a series of grants to local and state government entities, as well as institutions of higher education, nonprofits, unions, and tribes. The only entities that we at EDA are not authorized to provide grants to are individuals or for-profit companies. Through the American Rescue Plan funding, we are distributing this $3 billion through 6 different grant programs. It really is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to invest in communities across our country. Many of your communities have been left out or left behind in recent years, and this funding can really help support you drive towards the future that you and your constituents want to see. I want to spotlight 2 of the 6 of those programs. The first is the Good Jobs Challenge. The Good Jobs Challenge is the first workforce development solely focused EDA program that we've ever had. This program is all about getting workers the training that they need to be able to land good quality jobs. And in particular, we are looking to help fund programs that are focused on helping workers from underserved populations and communities. This program is designed to get Americans into good quality jobs by building and strengthening regional systems and industry partners that will lead to those good jobs. The applications for this program closed in February of this year. We had the applications open for over 6 months, and we received 509 applications from every state and territory and the District of Columbia in the United States. All that to say, there is huge demand for this kind of work, and we were just so pleased and really inspired by the type of applications and projects that we saw. We saw applications from a diverse range of workforce development programs that really show a strong commitment to underserved communities and really trying to find the barriers to employment and helping to remove those. As we reflect on the importance of creating interconnected workforce systems that enable access to in-demand skills, training, and connections to employers that lead to good quality jobs, we also recognize there's more that we can do with this $3 billion. And so I want to talk about another program that we had under the American Rescue Plan Act, which is our Build Back Better Regional Challenge. The intent of this program was to fund what we're calling regional industry clusters. We challenged states and communities across our country to tell us what were the growing emerging industries in their communities that, if with a significant amount of funding, would be able to really transform their communities and those industries to create new jobs, create new industries that were for the future. This was a 2-phase challenge. In December of this past year, our Secretary Gina Raimondo announced the 60 finalists for this challenge, which is $1 billion that we will ultimately be giving out. We are now currently in the phase, these 60 finalists that are each a coalition of partnering entities. They've proposed projects to either develop or scale industry sectors and develop and train the workforce that's needed for those sectors. Those partnerships represent a cross-section of the United States, including rural communities, coastal towns, major metropolitan areas, and of course, those areas that have been underserved. Included in our 60 finalists are 15 Indigenous communities, as well as 12 former coal communities. These projects represent industry sectors that are unique to each region, including advanced manufacturing, aerospace and defense, agriculture and natural resources, biotech and biomanufacturing, energy and resilience, healthcare, IT, transportation, logistics, and the water and blue economy. These finalists are currently competing in phase 2 of our challenge, which we will ultimately award 20 to 30 of the regional coalitions up to $100 million each to implement projects to support that industry clusters. Both of these programs we will be announcing the awardees of both of these programs no later than September 30th of this year, which is really exciting. Now we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about some of EDA's other programming so that for those of you who are interested in getting involved with EDA have a sense of the current other opportunities that we have to help support communities across our country. Our core programming is done through our public works and economic adjustment assistance programs, which provide economically distressed communities and regions with comprehensive and flexible resources to address a wide variety of economic needs. We can solicit applications that provide investments that support construction, planning, technical assistance, revolving loan funds. These are all eligible type of activities under these programs. These programs support the core mission of the Department of Commerce, which is to lead the creation and retention of jobs and increase private investment and advance innovation in communities across our country. There are no submission deadlines for this opportunity, so we certainly urge you to take a look at our website, eda.gov, to find out more information. EDA also manages the Build to Scale program. It is a portfolio of grant competitions that further technology-based economic development initiatives that accelerate high-quality job growth, while also creating more economic opportunities and support the future of the next generation of industry-leading companies. The competitions funded under this program include our Venture Challenge, which supports entrepreneurship and accelerating company growth in communities across the country, as well as our Capital Challenge, which seeks to increase access to capital in communities where risk capital is in short supply. We also have our University Center program, which is designed to enable institutions of higher education to establish and operate a university center focused on leveraging university assets to build regional economic systems that will support innovation and high-growth entrepreneurship. Now, the last program I want to mention is our Research and Technical Assistance Program. It provides funding for research, evaluation, and national technical assistance that promotes competitiveness and innovation in distressed rural and urban areas. These projects promote the advancement of innovation and job growth with a specific focus on building capacities for job growth, providing data, tools, technical assistance to support the export needs of businesses, and supporting growing ecosystems that attract foreign direct investment. Now, before I close, I want to mention another major priority for EDA. As some of you may know, it's been 17 years since EDA was last authorized by Congress. And over the last 17 years, new industries have emerged while others have declined. Regions have encountered and responded to devastating natural disasters, including the impacts of the global pandemic. Reauthorization is vitally important for us at EDA to be able to respond to new economic development challenges. And it will allow us to help us build our nation back better by giving us the ability to implement programs in a way that will further improve conditions in highly distressed communities. I encourage you to use your voice and provide your ideas to help best position EDA to help you be able to do all the work that you all are doing. Lastly, I want to mention that about 2 weeks ago, we released a new notice of funding opportunity, which is really exciting. It has 2 projects under it. One is about advancing equity impact in our investments. And so we are seeking applications right now until August 5th for organizations that will help organizations that serve underserved populations and communities to be able to have a stronger voice in local economic development, and to also help our current grantees further their outcomes around economic development equity. And then the second project we're funding under that notice of funding opportunity is what we're calling the Economic Recovery Corps Fellows. We are trying to build the capacity of economic development professionals in the field, and so this grant will help support and put more economic development capacity and support across the country, in particular regions that need it the most. So definitely urge you to take a look at that. All right, with that, I think I've taken up a good amount of time, so I'll pass this back to Janine. Thanks so much.
Hey, Michelle, thank you. That overview of the investments that you've made or are making is really helpful. We have had a few folks ask about ways in which they might be able to see a summary of what you've shared, or just see some of these opportunities for funding announcements. So you mentioned folks could go to the EDA website. My colleague Roderick is putting in a few additional links related to your work. Is there a way in which we might share with folks post this session just a few more links that would directly connect folks to the pieces you've mentioned today? Oh, you're on mute, Michelle.
Sorry. Yes, I can definitely share some links with you all to share with everyone after the session, but I will also attempt during the session to put a few links in the chat so everyone can see those as well.
Perfect. That's great. One of the things I wanted to also just check in with you on is that I know that the EDA and others have been really looking at how to support businesses, in particular, maybe small and medium-sized businesses, really get a better understanding of what job quality means to business competitiveness and success, and what we're hearing from workers in terms of what they're looking for when they think about wanting to be engaged in high quality work and want to be part of a high quality workplace, or a workplace that feels like it's centering workers and really understands the importance of investing in workers. Could you share a little bit about the task force or the work that was underway to come up with some frameworks or some tools to support business and industry, and what the status is of that initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. Actually, this is some of the work that we have a lot underway with other federal agencies. So a lot of our partnership and collaboration with other federal partners. We work very closely with the folks over at the Department of Labor and Department of Education, particularly on these type of issues around job quality and what does that mean. And also, I should mention the folks over at the White House, obviously the NEC and the National Economic Council and the Domestic Policy Council. These are topics that are regularly discussed. I don't want to spoil anything, but we are soon, I think we're going to have some more information around what that means to have a quality job and have some more finite definitions around that. I think as an interim, I will point to, in the Good Jobs Challenge, we did point to what we thought a good quality job was, particularly for that particular program, and what we would be looking for in terms of the type of jobs that we would be funding folks to provide training for. And so there's three major aspects to that. One around wages, a second component around benefits and making sure there were either a union job or provided basic benefits. And then the third component of that was making sure that there was opportunities for career progression. So that includes continual training opportunities and a career pathways that will provide room for advancement.
Great, thank you. I do just have a couple of more questions for you before I invite the other panelists to join us. I appreciate you lifting up just the tremendous amount of interest in particular, the Good Jobs Challenge. I had the reason to kind of look more closely at how many applications were in the manufacturing sector, for example, and I feel like I saw 20 to 30 applications focused on that sector. You mentioned potential investments in a range of sectors. Are there things that you would encourage states and regional areas to be thinking about or learning from, which investments you end up making and which ones you don't? In other words, how can we continue to all collectively try to meet the needs and demand, leveraging the resources you and other agencies are putting into this? But do you have any thoughts or recommendations for us all as we think about how to take some of what you're investing in and tap into it, leverage it in states and regions?
Absolutely. I think, and I assume you're talking more from kind of a workforce perspective. Yeah, we obviously have learned a lot, right? And I say we, not just EDA, but like the collective economic development, workforce development world have learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work well in terms of workforce initiatives, ones that lead to outcomes that I think we all are driving towards. I will say, as we thought about workforce at the Department of Commerce, our secretary in particular was very focused on job placement. I think one of the key things she really wanted us to hone in as we thought about this program was to make sure that we were not funding what she called train and pray programs. She really wanted to ensure that we were focusing on programs that are rooted in demand and that have strong employer commitment, so that once workers who have taken time and resources and invested in their own training and skills actually have a real job waiting for them at the end of the day. And so that's some of the things that we really focused on. So I guess if you think about the type of investments we are making, I will say, as much as we're excited about the projects that we will be investing in, as I mentioned, there was a huge amount of demand for these programs, and that there are still a lot of really great projects we weren't able to fund. And so I think one of the things that we'd love to be able to see is we'd love to see all of these projects be able to move forward and to have the support that they need. I think it just really shows how much demand there is for this type of work, and that we really do need to rally together as cross-sector partners to be able to make sure that this type of work continues and be able to have the funding and resources to be able to come to life.
Great, thank you. That's important. I love the cross-sector work that's ahead of us all. And the last question I have for you is regarding collaboration. So and learning, collaboration and learning from these investments. I think in at least one case, you are supporting some communities of practice or some type of mechanism or vehicle for the partnerships that you invest in to learn from each other. But how can we all continue to learn alongside you and others at EDA, and then again, the partnerships, that the work that's going to be invested in? What are some ways you see we might be able to continue to learn together?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are investing, along with the grants that I mentioned, we also are investing in, Janine, you'll appreciate this, communities of practice that will support the grantees that we are working with too. We recognize that I think both the grantees will benefit a lot from each other and having that community to work with, but I think we also will learn a lot from having that collective way to bring together all of our different grantees, see what kind of common challenges they're facing, and help bring some resources to bear. We are also investing in some research on all of our programs. So I think that's one way to definitely stay in touch on what we're learning, what we're seeing does work and doesn't work. Obviously, it's going to take some time for us to have the actual data to be able to do that. But I would encourage anyone that is interested in working with the EDA. We have these great resources called economic development representatives. We have one assigned to every state and territory in the country. They are phenomenal resources that can just help give anyone a sense of what is a different opportunity that EDA has currently, and how, particularly whatever you're focused on or what project you're working on, what's the best avenue for you all to pursue.
Great, thank you, Michelle. So you're going to stay with us for the next half hour, and we're going to invite the rest of the panelists to join into this conversation. And then before you leave, Michelle, we'll be sure to give you a few minutes to kind of reflect on what you're hearing is happening in other states. I didn't see any questions at this point that I think it would make sense for you to address from the audience. So I am going to turn to our panel and welcome and invite Adrian Esquivel, who's the Deputy Director of the Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance, to step into the spotlight with us. We're also excited to have Ana Luz Gonzalez Vasquez, who's the project manager from the UCLA Labor Center. So she'll be bringing in some perspectives from California. And we also have with us today Angela Klitsch, who's the president and CEO of Employ Indy, one of our workforce development board and workforce development leaders in Indiana. And last but not least, we have Rebecca Kuzner, who is the director of the Ohio Workforce Coalition and one of our SkillSpan Coalition leads. So welcome to all of you. It's great to have you joining in on this conversation about how we can work together to advance equity and job quality through industry partnerships. So we want to build off of the federal perspective investing that Michelle has shared with us about, to turn to Ana Luz and Rebecca to get us started, to share more about what's happening within each of your respective states. So Ana Luz, I'm going to invite you to share a bit more about what it looks like for California to be investing in these industry partnerships, and where you are seeing these partnerships leading to more equitable access to training, to hiring and advancement in quality jobs and career pathways. So welcome, Ana Luz.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit more about what California is doing. So California is really leading the way in investing in skill-focused industry partnerships. A lot of what Michelle mentioned about focusing on equity and job quality really resonates and really comes from the work that California has been doing to position equity, the environment, and job quality at the center of California's workforce development system. So California is funding these initiatives, and it really stems from the work that happened in 2017 when they launched the High Road Training Partnership Initiative. And the initiative funds employer and union partnerships in a variety of sectors that include construction, but also other sectors that are important to California's economy, like hospitality, healthcare, building and logistics, among other sectors. Each partnership is premised on the idea that we can deliver equity without paying attention to job quality, and that we can't build economically resilient communities without paying attention to environmental concerns. And that in order to effectively calibrate supply and demand in the labor market, we have to first start in principle with jobs. And that's what makes them industry driven. HRTPs are also advancing a worker-centered approach and a more inclusive definition of industry leadership. They recognize that workers are invaluable members of the partnerships, and their industry expertise is valued just as much as employer knowledge. Workers are engaging in very meaningful ways that include informing and shaping training programs and curricula, training other workers, mentoring other workers. And they're really at the center of developing industry solutions. And they're guided by equity, job quality, and climate resilience principles. And what I mean by that is that they aim to they build economic opportunity and build mobility for those who have been historically marginalized and excluded from opportunities for upward mobility. They're mitigating and supporting the adaptation to climate change and increasing environmental sustainability. And they're engaging with high road employers and workers to design skill-based solutions and pathways to quality jobs that answer both worker and employer needs. And what's really exciting about High Road Training Partnerships is that they're creating an infrastructure of support in which industry leaders are, again, working together to address both employer and workers' needs in real time. But they're also committed to addressing these bigger systemic issues in the long term. And the initiative has grown quite a bit. I'm going to focus on the higher training partnerships that exist outside of the construction sector. The initiative grew from 8 demonstration projects and has grown exponentially to almost 30 in several years, and it's projected to grow. And in fact, the Good Jobs Challenge was modeled after the higher training partnership initiative. You'll see a lot of common threads there. The UCLA Labor Center conducted an evaluation of the demonstration projects. And what we found is that HRTPs are creating an ecosystem of prosperity that is equally shared by everyone. New and incumbent workers gain access to training programs, on-the-job mentoring, and career pathways that help them be successful on the job and achieve economic stability. Employers gain a skilled and reliable workforce that improves productivity and quality of service, and that simultaneously contributes to industry solutions that secure their competitive advantage. Unions also gain new members and can provide professional development opportunities for current members. And communities also become environmentally and economically resilient by working alongside employers, workers, and labor organizations to develop recruitment pipelines, equitable employment opportunities, climate mitigation strategies, and other worker-centered projects that empower communities. And HRTPs are really proving that you can address these broader systemic issues like income inequality, economic competitiveness, and climate change while promoting worker power.
We are so lucky to have you with us, Annalise. I appreciate that you have been able to take a look at what's happening on the ground with these partnerships and from a research and evaluation perspective, really be able to lift up and put a spotlight on what some of the critical success factors look like for these partnerships. And one of the things I heard you saying is that it's really important to for these partnerships and their success to be giving equal voice to a range of stakeholders, including business and industry and centering workers. So we will have a minute to dig into some of what you're learning and seeing more specifically, particularly on the worker voice in a minute. I do want to invite Rebecca then to share a bit more about not a bit, whatever amount you want to, about what's happening there in Ohio from an industry partnership perspective. I know that the state has made some investments in partnerships over the years and recently, and so I'd love to hear what you're seeing from your vantage point there with these investments.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to share. So yes, Ohio has a, probably about 10 to 15 year history with sector partnerships, or what we all would call sector partnerships, and has really over the years tried a bunch of different things. And I would say we have typically focused really on state support for local actions. And I think that's consistent with what we heard Michelle saying about local areas, regions, really knowing what they need, and the state sort of seeing itself as a way to enable that work. The most recent iteration that I was really excited about actually was a shift for us about 5 years ago, when we started funding sector partnerships across the state of Ohio, actually with general revenue money. And so this was a state investment rather than redeploying any WIA or WIOA funds or relying on philanthropic funds. It was the state saying, hey, we think this works, we're going to invest. And so that really was a shift. Those sector partnership grants will fund both new partnerships, so areas that want to put together a partnership, try it out, as well as organizations and partnerships that are looking to grow. And excuse me, what it has done is really put some momentum behind partnerships across the state, recognizing that communities also need support from others, and philanthropy still has a role, and local government still has a role from a funding perspective. But the state investments have really contributed to some consistent funding and allowed that work to grow. And, from an impact perspective, while the state doesn't necessarily prescribe some of the job quality and equity goals that we like to see, there are strong local focuses in those areas. And for example, in the Cleveland area, one of the sector partnerships walked manufacturers through an assessment of the race, gender, age of the manufacturing sector, and really showed them the data, and then was able to make the case that, okay, if we know this is who's not working for you, and we know these folks are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, then might you or ought you to consider hiring from individuals who are justice involved or impacted to open up and expand your pool. And they've been successful in getting those sorts of commitments. And so I think, I'll just leave that one example of where there's been efforts to really move the needle there. But I think even in like in Cincinnati, where 4 long-term care providers came together to hire a staff who could support their frontline workers, that again builds on work that is existing and builds on a partnership, but takes it to the next level, looking at how do we keep folks in these jobs and help them more strategically advance. So that navigator supports those workers across the 4 long-term care facilities. And again, is an example of how a partnership has grown and evolved over time. So I think the local connection and the operating support is critically important, and I'm sure there's lots of other things for us to talk about.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's exciting to hear you note the general fund investment that's happening, and how, regardless of what the state might be prescribing from a policy perspective, how you're seeing in local areas people stepping in and up to really try to bring awareness to the business community about the needs and opportunities to focus more on job quality and equity, and the ways, and sharing with us some of the ways that that's happening. Adrian and Angela, so you're working with partnerships regionally, locally in Indianapolis and Chicago. Adrian, I'm going to invite you to share a bit more about what this looks like in the Chicago region, and then Angela, turn to you.
Thanks. Hi, all. Again, Adrian Esquivel with the Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance. We're a private funder collaborative based at our region's community foundation, the Chicago Community Trust. So the Funder Alliance funds broadly in employer practice change, systems, workforce development system alignment, and also now in worker power and worker voice. So we do support and fund kind of the bread and butter sector partnerships. We have some in healthcare, early childhood education, a regional one in manufacturing that we have supported over time that are run by our partners. And then also, one thing just to highlight and bring up as well too, and happy to talk more about those sector partnerships specifically, but we found that in our field of workforce development that, historically has had the dual customer model of serving job seekers and employers, but we found in Chicagoland, it really kind of was centering more employers and capital in place of workers and people. So what we've been trying to do is intentionally kind of say that, a job, the labor market doesn't always function in a way that if there's the demand for it, or if you're skilled to a certain level, that you're going to get a job that has, career ladder, career pathway. So we've been able to kind of work with our sector partnerships to start to investigate how those internal processes across systems in sectors either promote or don't promote career pathways in there as well, while also supporting efforts to empower workers to know more about their rights and enforcement mechanisms as well to try and create a better balance in between. So it's definitely a needle to thread, but that's something that we're working on here in Chicagoland with our collaborative.
Thank you. That needle of the thread is really important, and I appreciate you emphasizing just how you're trying to shift the focus a bit, shift the engagement a bit, so that it's not primarily only centered on business engagement, and that workers and worker power and voice is really also being centered. Angela, what does all of this look like in Indianapolis?
So I think similar to other markets, we've really tried to understand the demand of employers in our community and have created sector partnerships, in healthcare and advanced manufacturing, building off of pre-existing work that has been important for the construction and trades, and really highlighting our ability to bring more diverse talent and women to the front door of those apprenticeable occupations. We've also built out things around life sciences and information technology and the IT, as well as one of our strategies around business operations and financial services. While it is sector-based, we find that it is crossing sectors. So really meeting employers where they're at about their hiring needs and articulating the most diverse supply chain of talent exists right now in the K through 12 environment. We have a movement where there are career academies in our local marketplace. How might we think more creatively of bringing you farther upstream to be co-creators of talent and not just consumers of talent on the back end? Now, this has been a heavy lift in that we bring our community college to the table, Ivy Tech. We bring the Department of Education, our Commission for Higher Education, and local providers like our largest public school system, and create these diverse and divergent pathways where you're combining education and employment that meets employer demand for talent, and also to deal with equity issues around funding. If we can get more students to acquire these skills, acquire these requisite credentials and certifications while they're in the education system, that helps address the challenge that we have for many of our residents who are unable to afford education, particularly a four-year degree. So it's been really exciting to bring employers to the table, to speak to the needs of their companies, and to offer up a suite of opportunities and ways to engage early on in the creation of the talent in the high school space, but then also offering up those pathways for individuals who are not currently in education or employment. So we have had a heavy focus in Indianapolis of working with Opportunity Youth. I'm sure it will not be surprising that this is predominantly Black, and young men. And so all the pathways that we've been creating through Talent Bound, which has been philanthropically funded by JP Morgan Chase and many others in our community that are respective to the pathways in demand for employers in our community hiring. We are aligning all of those pieces of work to additional populations coming out of the criminal justice system, as well as the opportunity youth that we know we have to foundationally kind of prep in many instances for these modern youth apprentices, and then moving those into registered apprentices. So those are partly our strategies here locally to meet employer demand for talent, but to argue that there's lots of paths up the mountain and many ways that they can engage and actually create an alternative talent supply chain where they have more agency over addressing issues of equity, also addressing issues of the modern day skill set needed for a 21st century employee.
Angela, I appreciate you bringing into this just what it looks like for businesses to be engaging with each other within industry sectors, but what you're also seeing as the potential opportunity that cuts across industry sectors. We did have a question about what it looks like to try to engage small and medium-sized companies in this work, and I'm curious if you have some thoughts to share on what successes or challenges have looked like for you. And then I'm also just going to ask you to say a few words about about Marion County's Good Wages Initiative too, while we've got you kind of spotlighted here.
I'd be happy to. So we work very closely with our Chamber of Commerce and other different membership associations that are not even specific to industry, but maybe are bringing together small and medium-sized enterprises. Part of the benefits package of membership joining is the TA that as a workforce development board and intermediary we can bring to the table. I think it's really important to note that the sector-based partnerships where we really have employers paying wages for individuals who are also receiving concurrent education, and it's all being kind of like paid for the 3-year program, that's at the tail end of a continuum of engagement. So I mentioned Talent Bound. It's an umbrella that we use to really manifest what it was a passage in 2016 from our state legislature about graduation pathways. Students must have quality work-based learning experiences to achieve a high school degree. So schools were struggling with engaging the employer community. Employers were overwhelmed by the requests that were happening, and it was unfunded. So we stepped into that space, and again, with philanthropic support, created a technology platform in addition to the human capital to support that. But we have real low touch efforts on the front end, and we have staff, business professional staff out there kind of hunting businesses to engage. On that front end, it's exposed. We would ask for a company to come into the school, come into a community-based organization, and just share whether it's their individual story, which is really helpful for a younger generation to see someone successful in an industry that looks like them, or to share information about their company. That's a huge hook for small and medium-sized enterprises because so many young people don't know of their company, the brand, the name. It's very different if you're a large company in our community like Lilly or Roche. Then we would ask for a little bit more commitment. This is under the exposure. So students or people in our community, those participating in programs around upskilling are going to go out to the site of the employer and actually do a tour. There can be a talent challenge that's delivered. And then the highest level of kind of connectivity is really around internships and modern youth apprenticeships. So that's where we really engage employers more heavily, and that they're actually paying in many instances for that that employee that's coming on site to be there. As we have also, vetted, trained, have a lot of supportive services around that individual. That is our, value proposition for the employer community. If you work with us on this continuum, and should issues arise in the workplace, we'll help to mitigate those. And then I believe you asked me as well for the Good Wages Initiative. So the broader concept is called Choice Employers. And it's this idea that, again, we believe that not all jobs are created equal, and there's many factors that need to be taken into consideration for an individual to be successful in the workplace. The first kind of tenet of our Choice Employers framework out of the gate is Good Wages Initiative. This has been volunteer driven up to about a year and a half ago when Employ Indy has stepped in with small philanthropic funding to support what is now called the Good Wages Initiative. It started the Living Wage Initiative that was not that was not able to be shepherded through in its current structure with the business community. So we landed on good wages. It's $18 an hour or higher wage threshold, and it's employer-sponsored healthcare benefits. It's, again, voluntary, and it's a way for us to try to recognize employers in our community who are making those strategic steps internally to be an employer of choice, to offer up many of the facets of job quality. We will see 3 more kind of tenets and ways that employers can identify as choice in the coming year plus. One is around career pathways and that articulation and illumination, advancement opportunities, as well as the funding structures that are put in front to help people advance as they're an incumbent worker. Diversity, equity, inclusion. We are not the experts, but we have small funding from the Annie Casey Foundation to vet products and tools so that we can feel more confidence in recommending those to employers who want to go on that journey. And the third is called an employer resource network. And that's a national model taking into consideration that there are a number of jobs that will not meet the $18 an hour threshold, but the challenges for productivity on the workplace are really about life challenges. They're about childcare, they're about transportation, and funding is aggregated from the employer community to support a liaison who is really going to be mitigating those challenges for that employee workforce. So excited to share more of those come out of the gate, but as we've spent the last 6 years really trying to increase the efficacy of our supply side programming, increasing the robustness of the skills of those job seekers, the reality is that we don't see enough good and promising jobs on the back end. And we want to be more intentional about aligning those that we're spending federal dollars as well as philanthropic and state monies on for training to the jobs that are going to allow for economic mobility and for them to have a life of dignity.
Thanks, Angela. There is a lot to dig into there. It's exciting, and I appreciate you sharing just kind of where you are in the emerging initiative here. Adrian, Angela mentioned, just the wage aspects of a lot of this, and we know that a lot of industry partnership work centers on industries where, more traditional industry sectors, manufacturing, healthcare. I'd love to hear more about why you all moved forward the Chicago Early Childhood Workforce Partnership and how business engagement, worker voice and engagement, and job quality kind of are syncing up for that sector right now in your area.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So this early childhood education sector partnership is been around for a little while and is emerging as far as the work that's being done. I think understanding more about the needs of the caring economy and needing to focus on that element, especially coming in through the pandemic, we've seen the importance of that as well too. And so the initial research that's come out of that, has been pretty striking in the sense that a wage study was conducted for a number of organizations that were there, and we disaggregate the data. Unsurprisingly, workers of color are making proportionally less than their white counterparts, and the sector that are competing for talent in early childhood end up being logistics companies, Uber, Lyft, et cetera. So I think understanding a bit of the dynamic, especially for elements of that, helps to kind of raise more awareness within the community around what types of public investments have we made in the caring economy. What is the legacy of structural racism in the caring economy that needs to be brought to light as well too. So as this emerges, and continues to develop, we'll have a lot more to share. I'm happy to put you in touch with, or anybody who's listening, with some of the folks that are working really closely on that as well too. But all those dynamics definitely are at play, and that's kind of what we've seen as wanting to support and fund more efforts around that sector.
Thank you. I want to open it up to see if Rebecca and Anna Luz have anything more you want to share just about what it looks like for maybe small and medium-sized businesses to be engaging in these partnerships, but really what it looks like to try to work with business and industry on the job quality side. Rebecca, you gave a few examples earlier, but is there anything else you want to lift up? And then Anna Luz, invite you to do the same.
I think one of the interesting points with small to medium sized companies is the availability, well, and even large, I guess, but the availability of data and the capacity to pull it together and to really look at the workforce, how it's evolving and so on, is an ongoing challenge. And what we see a lot is that there's interest, but when it comes down to the operational capacity to go in and sit down and make these sorts of changes or have these sorts of conversations, that gets more difficult when the person that you're working with is the president of the company and doing the hiring and, you know, is responsible for this whole other cluster of issues. And so I think to the extent that we can equip local partnerships with the support, as Angela mentioned, having those business experts who are out there, being able to make the case and provide those supports is really important. You know, it does give me a little bit of heartburn because we ask workforce development professionals to do a whole continuum of things that are not always skill sets that you would find in one person. But my heartburn aside, I think it's really important to continue to work with those business associations and chambers and other individuals who are connecting with the business community to support those small and mid-size companies.
And I don't have much to add, Janine, because the higher opportunity partnerships that we studied work with larger businesses, but engaging with employers is often not surprisingly the best. As folks mentioned, Rebecca and others, there's challenges to working with employers. But you know, something that I feel like is really important about industry partnerships is that they're changing the way that employers and workers and unions interact. Sometimes they do have very contentious relationships, but by creating this space and this infrastructure, you know, the needs of the employers as well as the workers are addressed, and that's something that I feel like is really important. But it's also, you know, difficult, right, to achieve and to get everybody at the table to be able to then discuss how to address these needs.
Yeah, I appreciate you settling in on the relationship building aspects of this. And Rebecca, I just wanted to also say I appreciate you emphasizing the really challenging job that both workforce development professionals and economic development professionals have. And I've done a lot of work over the years in trying to build bridges between economic developers, community developers, and workforce developers. And it's just capacity right now in all contexts is at, right? Like we're stretched, everyone's stretched. So I just feel like we have to find ways to come together to align across these different sectors, like economic, workforce, community development, in the ways you were describing, and having labor unions and worker organizing entities and education and training partners differently in the mix with all of this is super, super critical. And we're gonna pivot to talk more about this kind of broader stakeholder engagement, worker engagement. Before we do that, Michelle, just wanted to invite you to share any final closing reflections or comments as you've been listening to your fellow panelists here share more about what's going on in their states and communities.
Thanks, Janine. No, it was great to hear. I mean, the work that you're all doing is so incredibly important and really inspiring. I did want to comment on the line of comments that you all made around small and medium-sized businesses versus large companies. I actually worked at the Small Business Administration in the previous administration, and so I think particularly thinking about workforce, it is a different animal, right? When you're working with small and medium-sized companies, oftentimes, as you all know, the owner is also the HR person and the finance person. And so they just don't have the resources and the ability that some of the large companies who have full HR departments and arms can do to be able to do all of these great, you know, skills-based hiring initiatives or even partnerships with training providers. And so I have been encouraged by some work that I've seen of larger companies who start a training program and then scale it to other companies in their region that are smaller, medium-sized businesses. So I guess that's one thing that I would really encourage folks in different regions to think about is potentially starting with a large company that may have the resources to do it. And I think oftentimes I've been really pleasantly surprised. A lot of these large companies realize that by just making the overall talent pool better, it benefits them, even if it helps, competitors or folks, obviously folks in their supply chain, it obviously directly helps them too. And so I think having that more partnership amongst employers to think about how they can build a training program to meet their collective needs has been something that I've seen done successfully and just really helps everyone out.
Thanks, Michelle. I love that you were landing us on that point about just the scaling up of these and the business community engaging in ways that optimizes where they can cooperate and collaborate and not just sort of be in more of a competitive mindset around this, especially on the worker side of things. So thank you again for joining us today. We're so grateful for your leadership and all that you and others at the Economic Development Administration, Department of Commerce are doing to invest in these efforts. So back to all right, thank you. So we do want to then sort of circle back around to talking more about worker engagement, equity, and inclusion. We did have a question from the chat or from the Q&A about some of the work-based learning and apprenticeship efforts that I think in particular, Angela, you had mentioned. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about Anna Luz, have you share a little bit about what you're seeing from a high road training partnership perspective in terms of engaging workers differently, both on the training side of things and then on kind of the employment, hiring, advancement side of things. And then we could work in some of the skills training aspects of this to other people's comments or remarks. But Anna Luz, I'm going to turn back to you to dig in a little bit on what this worker engagement and voice really looks like in practice.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's really important to highlight about how high road training partnerships are engaging workers is by thinking about, engagement beyond worker input. Of course, getting surveys and being able to gather information from workers is really important. But what high road training partnerships are doing are creating those infrastructures, because these are unions. They also have collective bargaining agreements, and some have created committees, worker committees that help inform solutions. But it's more than just checking a box and saying, yes, we've added worker input. It's really engaging workers and creating these formal spaces where workers have decision-making power. And that's really important, and something that high road training partnerships are doing, and that is really changing, like I said, the way that workers and employers engage. They have to build trust. They have to be able to come to a consensus on what issues they're going to address. But by having both employers and workers at the table, it really does change the way that workforce development is done, that training is done. Workers are involved in developing curricula. So it's not just about, we need this training program. It really is centered on workers' needs and employers' needs. So workers help inform the curricula. Like I mentioned before, they train other workers and they mentor other workers as well. So it's really thinking about worker engagement in a very different way that centers the expertise of the worker, and that provides spaces for workers to have a real voice, and creating those tables so that they also have decision-making power.
That's great. Those are such good examples of what this looks like in practice. Adrian, I'm curious what you'd add to the mix from your experience there in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, as far as like what true engagement looks like versus just a survey, which, I mean, surveys are helpful, don't get me wrong, but it's like, that's not exactly like incorporating worker voice into the job. So, I think one of the pieces that we're working on and funding and supporting is working with our local workforce board, the nonprofit organizations that are doing the work, our education partners, worker centers as well, is on kind of understanding both education around worker rights, how the enforcement actually works. Because if we have some, on paper progressive laws in Chicago around worker rights, but they're not being enforced, or if people don't even know how to follow them, that's an issue. And then also working through policy as well. And also like on the small and medium businesses, kind of like tying that in, because we are often threading that needle. It's, it kind of workers collectively knowing their rights and being able to report on these things doesn't always have to be like this scary thing for employers in a way, as much as it can be like, if employer X down the block owned by a capital hedge fund or something is actually violating the law, like that's not competitive for you. And think about like in manufacturing is another example in Chicago where we have a lot of different manufacturers. There's that exist. There's not like the huge. I mean, there are large manufacturers that have but like the share is spread out so much that it's important for kind of collective impact to happen and change as well too. So that's kind of what we're thinking about it right now as far as increasing worker rights, as like not trying to doesn't have to be this like scary thing for employers, as much as it can actually also help on top of the fact that it actually is like it's the law and it's important to do that as well too.
Thank you, Adrian. That's such a great and important point about this. Doesn't have to be seen as something scary or something that's really an affront or challenging to the business community. Rebecca, you were smiling. I think you've put something into chat. I'd like to invite you to share anything more you want to add into the mix here on this.
I think I summed it up in my comment in the chat, just thinking more broadly about job quality and equity is, we are in the workforce field, but we touch a little bit of everything when it comes down to it. And so there are multiple opportunities to influence how job quality or equity agendas are embedded in our work, and procurement and the procurement process is just one of them.
Yeah, thank you. You just took me to a paper that I worked on before coming to the National Skills Coalition on all the ways that we can be embedding job quality and equity in economic development policies and practices, in workforce development policies and practices. So I love that you broadened that for us all. So I'm gonna shift a little bit to kind of go back to the training side of this. So in terms of engaging workers, right, and the workers, job seekers, right now there's been some incredible work done around the country. I'm hoping Nikisha in her upcoming panel discussion will be able to get into some of this, which is where people are starting to center centering humans, right? Centering people in the design of our policies and our programs and these partnerships. So from a training perspective, could Angela, Annalise, maybe you share a little bit more, Rebecca, you too, like what does it look like on the training side of education training side of things, what does it look like to be centering different populations, especially so we can disrupt occupational segregation and create more equitable access to education and career pathways? And then like, how do you bring workers into some of that? Annalise, do you want to start and maybe go to Angela?
Sure. I mean, like I mentioned before, like HRTPs engage workers as co-leaders in a lot of different activities. That this includes program development, design, recruitment, and the development of certification programs, pre-apprenticeship programs. And what's exciting about the work that folks are doing is that they really center the training on workers' needs. If there's language barriers, if there are language barriers or any other barriers that exist, like transportation or childcare or anything else like that, HRTPs are really meeting where workers are at and designing the curriculum based on the work, the expertise of the worker. That's I think something that needs to be done more often, because workers know how to do the job. They know how to address issues on the job. and being able to provide that opportunity for workers to help design curricula, to create certification programs that that they want to achieve, like identifying opportunities for upskilling, jobs that they want to be doing. For example, the Building Skills Partnership. This is a partnership between janitorial companies and unions, and they created a green janitor education program. And what they did is they developed a certification program on environmental sustainability practices to help workers not only be safer on the job by using chemicals that are not harmful for them, but also making sure that employers are able to comply with sustainability practices. The workers informed the development of that program. And they also, the certification program was also taught in Spanish, because most of the workers spoke Spanish. So it's really involving workers at every step of the development of training programs, to training other workers, as well as creating training programs that workers want. And that's really centering workers in the development of these training programs.
Those examples are really helpful and loose. Curious, Angela, what you'd add into the mix, and especially as we think about apprenticeship programs or other work-based learning programs, like what might that look like for employers and workers to be joining together to design some of this?
Right. So, I mean, I think, with the training, like, we really need the employers at the table at the same time, not only because I have found in my role that often the training that's being delivered gets, it's time sensitive. And so the employers are moving at a much rapid pace, and oftentimes the education delivery system that we utilize. We have been inundated during COVID with a number of training providers, whether entering the market or an investment of funds to scale up training. But there was not necessarily that back end coordination. Does this training lead to employers who are hiring for that credential or certification? So we think a function of our workforce development board is to go beyond the ETPL list and to really get down and granular in our local market of what training provider and resultant credential marries with the employers that part of our portal, part of our portfolio in our conversations as well. If we put aside the training, like just trying to figure it all out, is the training relevant? Is the training fast? Because time is the enemy of the adult learner. Is the training going to allow them to be economically mobile beyond that singular employer? We have a lot of inside employer training that happens that if you kind of dig into it, it's not providing that staircase that we would expect for that type of federal or state investment of government funds. But we have found that time and effort and investment has to be spent on outreach and connection and relationship building, and the trust and rapport to even then move someone into training. So, to that extent, we're back where we were early on in my tenure, and that we have a really low unemployment rate. We need people to come off the sidelines. They have multiple barriers to being successful, and a lot of them are mindsets. So we've aligned a lot of job readiness activity, exposure activity funded through philanthropy and government activity for that preparation piece before even then hopefully leveraging the employer's commitment and generous subsidies for funding around the training. But having that level of confidence, the training meets employer demand, and that there can even be some commitment of at least an interview if they are participating and graduating at a certain level with this training or with that credential, is a really important piece to really reduce friction in this long-term continuum.
I appreciate those points about the reducing the friction. I do think that we have to acknowledge that we're not going to be able to train our way to equity, that there are structural reasons why we continue to see people getting through training programs and getting credentials and not getting hired. One, thought that I think energizes me is the work that's being done at Opportunity at Work, and thinking about alternative pathways to credentials and prior learning assessments, and really looking at skills and competencies. And that can be challenging because it's, that's an entire system that is thinking through how can I more quickly get individuals ready to be, get people validated, get their skills validated, and demonstrate their readiness to companies. So I think there's a whole bunch of topics for the future of workforce when it comes down to it. And I think that skills-based hiring and being more explicit about how we're documenting skills is one piece of that as we move towards trying to get more folks coming back into the workforce.
Rebecca, I appreciate you jumping into that. Is there anything more you would add? I know your coalition, it has made a commitment, like many others, to focus more on racial equity and inclusion. And I wanted to give you a moment to say anything more you want about, again, what does that kind of commitment look like in policy or in practice from your coalition's perspective?
Thank you. Well, it's interesting, right? We are in a state that is relatively conservative, with the exception of our metro areas. And so from a policy perspective, it looks like trying to combat anti-CRT efforts. And so there's some very foundational considerations when it comes to an equity conversation. From the coalition's perspective, we really are centering or working to center race as one of the driving considerations in the work that we do. So we are participating, for example, with the National Skills Coalition's Racial Equity Learning Group. And through that work, we are trying to better understand the racial implications of the benefit cliff. Who's impacted? Where are they working? And do we see clusters by sector and geography or race and gender, actually? And so, really trying to bring information to the field, but then also to provide local partnerships with kind of a reminder that we see the disparities. We know there's occupational clustering. Here's what wages look like. And collectively hold each other accountable for progress.
Can I add something to what Rebecca mentioned?
Yeah, please.
Oh,
please.
I think it's so important to look at data through a racial and equity lens. One of the things that HRTPs are doing is doing just that, identifying opportunities for upward mobility for folks that have been historically excluded from quality jobs, and looking at jobs and identifying ways that they can help not train but also place workers in quality jobs, but provide the support systems that they need. And I feel like that's something that oftentimes gets overlooked, and it's so important to be able to provide the space for people to think about these issues. We get so caught up in the day-to-day, just managing programs or meeting deliverables, but really having that opportunity to think about these issues and identify solutions to address these issues is so important. And I wanted to emphasize that because it's so exciting that folks are talking about, really focusing in and honing in on these broader systemic issues that historically prevent folks from, particularly people of color, from thriving.
Adrian, Angela, anything you want to add in to build off of what Rebecca and Annalise have just shared? I feel like data in part, as mentioned, tied to helping us all understand how these industry partnerships, how our career pathway programs and investments are focusing on addressing racial equity gaps or disparities, as well as gender equity and other equity issues more broadly. I'm going to wrap up a final question I had for all of you up with the data, the measurement side of this, because we can't hold ourselves collectively accountable for any of this if we don't have the good data and information to know, what's working for whom, to what end, to what labor market outcomes. But also, we really need to make sure that federal and state policymakers are focusing on the right things as they're shaping their investment strategies and their policies. So I want to hear from each of you on what you want to say, or what do you think federal and state policymakers need to be doing differently to make sure that we're investing in the kind of work you're all describing? Because as somebody's already noted, we also need to make sure we have the people capacity, the people on the front lines of doing all this work are in equitable, good quality jobs, and also have the training and the supports needed to do this work, which is really intensive and really, really challenging. So final question for you all to kind of reflect on is, what's the message you want to convey to federal and state policymakers? What do you want to say, if anything, then on the data side of this as well?
Well, this is something that I've been struggling with, and it's more of a philosophical conversation. I'm not sure what policy can be brought to bear to address it, but I am concerned about the demand for jobs that are needed. However, these jobs have a public benefit, and so their wage is not commensurate with that public benefit. Let's think of teachers. Let's think of home health care aides. Let's think of early childhood professionals. We've got a real challenge that just providing funding for training will not assist with, because again, those jobs would not be considered good and promising, but we need them to run as a society. And I don't know what the solution is, but I will say that within my power, I don't often want to train people to those jobs because of the limitations on their economic mobility.
I'd echo that. I mean, that's coming up in long-term care, home health care, the behavioral health field, hospitality and retail, when we think about thriving metro areas and what we need to see there. But they're not they're not on the in-demand jobs lists. And so I think it's on us to consider the pathways. It's on us to look at where there are transferable skills and try to build that and embed the data, or embed strategies into helping folks stay within those sectors, but then also helping them move out. And that gets into even cross-sector partnerships. And I know there's some examples nationally of those sorts of engagements. So I think we have to get creative. Data offering the disaggregating data should just be our default. And not only is it not the default, but there's a lot of data we don't even gather. I learned recently in Ohio, we don't collect demographic information for one of our major statewide training investments. We just, to make it easier. And so we have to collect it, we have to disaggregate it, and then we have to use it.
I totally agree with what Rebecca said, but I also think that, our North Star should be for workers to achieve economic prosperity, not just placements, but really thinking beyond that, right? Making sure that workers are thriving. And to do this, we do have to change, how we do workforce development and really invest in models that work. Everyone mentioned, some of those exciting models and innovative models. And we also have to, I think, really take a closer look at how we're measuring success. It has to go beyond skills gains and job placements. We have to look at a range of process measures, including worker voice, leadership, and other qualitative measures of job quality and equity improvements.
I'll just briefly say I agree with what everyone has been saying as well, and just that, a plug for also continuing to think about how we value the changes in behaviors and changes in systems as well too, that we can, I just really appreciate what you are saying about how, we need to think beyond just skills and placement and retention, and that continues to drive a mindset shift among partners who are trying to keep up with funding streams that have these requirements that, so it all just kind of ends up connecting to this type of piece as well too. And so yeah, we just continue to say a plug for change, way to always be thinking about if systems are changing and behavior is changing, these are really important things as well.
Great, thank you all. I really wanted just to close our session with all of you by saying thank you. We have covered a range of topics, an important range of topics in a pretty short amount of time, all things considered, but we really appreciate the experience that you've brought, the insights you've shared with us, and also just giving us some things to think about for the future regarding policy and practice and some of this cross systems change work that you're all really talking about. And again, the importance of the relationships that drive any and all of this work. So Adriana, Luce, Angela, Rebecca, thank you for your time today. And I just wanted to thank all of you who have joined us for this session. We hope you are leaving with some nuggets of ideas for ways that you can help inform and influence the industry partnership work that's happening in your local communities, in your region, at the state level. We encourage you all to continue to reach out to the National Skills Coalition and those who joined us for this panel today. We need to all be learning from each other, collaborating and informing each other's work. Please, again, mark June 21st on your calendars to join us for the next summit sequel that my colleague Nikisha Rajans will be leading. And again, you can register for that webinar in a link that will be provided. And last but not least, one more plug for our Skills in the Skills Summit in Washington, D.C. next May. So again, please put that on your calendars, May 1st through 3rd. And with that, we're going to say goodbye and thank you.